Settle in gently and let the lights of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza come on one by one, not too bright. Just enough to see the stage, the prize counter, the checkered floor, and the soft shapes of old mascots waiting in the quiet. Five Nights at Freddy's is a horror series built from very simple materials. A night shift, a camera system, a limited supply of power, a few smiling characters, and the uneasy feeling that something made for children has kept moving long after the party ended. The facts around this series can be strange, funny, tragic, mechanical, and deeply tangled, but they all circle the same little room. A person is alone after midnight. The building is not as empty as it should be, and every small sound begins to matter. This can be held slowly, like walking through an old arcade after closing time. Each fact opens one door, then another, moving through the games, the lore, the books, the film world, the fan theories, and the long history of animatronic faces that refuse to stay only mechanical. The point is not to rush toward one final answer. FNAF has never worked that way. Its mystery is made from newspaper clippings, phone calls, minigames, broken masks, hidden rooms, children's drawings, restaurant rumours, and machines that seem to remember more than they should. So let the story move softly from the first office to the newer ruins, while the old stage waits in the dark. Five Nights at Freddy's began as an independent game by Scott Cawthon. Its small scale is part of why it felt so sharp. The reason it lingers is that Fazbear horror usually begins with something practical, then lets the practical thing gather emotional weight. The building still has rules, employees, equipment, and company language, yet every ordinary detail seems to have been designed around a wound nobody will name directly. In that quiet gap between business and grief, the fact becomes more than background. The first game released in August 2014. That date matters because the series grew with unusual speed, moving from a strange indie release into one of the most recognisable horror franchises of the decade. It also shows how the series makes fear feel archival. A clue can sit inside an old room, a camera feed, a paycheck, a minigame, or a damaged costume, waiting for later games to change its meaning. Nothing in FNAF feels completely finished once it appears. The past keeps reaching forward, and the smallest detail can become a door into another version of the story. The idea famously followed criticism of Scott Cawthon's earlier family-friendly game characters. People said the characters looked unintentionally creepy, and that criticism became fuel. This detail matters because the franchise rarely separates childhood imagery from adult failure. The mascots are bright, the parties are cheerful, and the names are silly. But behind them are decisions made by owners, technicians, parents, killers, and companies. The contrast gives the fact its strange ache. It belongs to a world where innocence is not gone. It has been placed too close to danger. The original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza setting works because it feels ordinary. The restaurant is not a castle or haunted mansion. A slower look makes the idea feel less like trivia and more like atmosphere. FNAF is built from repeated habits: checking, listening, waiting, winding, watching, hiding, and trying not to panic too early. When this fact enters that rhythm, it gives the room another reason to feel awake. The old restaurant becomes a place where routine itself has started to remember. The first game runs from midnight to 6 in the morning. That simple time frame gives every night a ritual shape. What makes it useful is the way it connects mechanics to story. FNAF often turns a survival rule into a lore clue without announcing the change. A door, a mask, a vent, a camera, or a music box begins as something needed to survive, then slowly becomes evidence of how the company built fear into the walls. This fact belongs to that same quiet design language. Power management is one of the original game's most important mechanics. Doors, lights and cameras all cost electricity, so safety is never free. There is a sadness underneath the detail because so many FNAF threats are also victims, memories, copies, or remains. The machine that lunges from the Sark may be frightening, but the larger story keeps asking why it is moving at all. That question gives the horror a mournful centre. The fear does not erase the tragedy, it carries it forward in metal and fabric. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy form the first central animatronic group. Their designs are simple enough to remember instantly. A bear, a rabbit, a chicken and a pirate fox, each friendly in daylight and wrong after hours. The fact also fits the series' habit of making official explanations feel untrustworthy. Fazbear Entertainment often speaks as if everything is normal, marketable, repairable, or safely contained. The story underneath says otherwise. Every cheerful surface seems to be covering a maintenance problem, a legal problem, a haunting, or a memory too costly for the company to admit. Bonnie often becomes the first major pressure on the left side of the office. That early approach teaches the rhythm of checking cameras, listening, and deciding when a door needs to close. It works because FNAF understands that small spaces can feel enormous when the imagination is trapped inside them. An office, bedroom, service room, hallway or storage area can become a whole world after midnight. Once the lights are low and movement is uncertain, even a tiny fact can stretch across the building like a shadow. Chica usually threatens from the right side. The symmetry of left and right makes the office feel like a small trapped body, with danger pressing in from both sides. This part of the lore feels important because it keeps the killer, the children, the company and the machines tied together. FNAF is rarely about one monster acting alone. It is about an ecosystem of negligence and denial that lets the monster's damage keep finding new shells. The fact becomes another piece of that long chain. Foxy behaves differently from the others in Pirate Cove. He waits, peeks out, and eventually sprints, making him feel less like a wandering mascot and more like a punishment for neglect. The detail has staying power because the series invites uncertainty without letting everything become meaningless. There may be debate around timelines, names, motives, and continuities, but the emotional pattern remains steady. Children are harmed, adults lie, machines inherit the damage, and the restaurants reopen anyway. That pattern gives even a small clue a heavy place to rest. Freddy's movement is quieter and more ominous. He often advances through darkness with laughter and music, becoming frightening because he does not need to rush to feel inevitable. It also gives the franchise another texture of performance. Mascots perform for children. Employees perform calm for customers. Companies perform safety for the public. And sometimes killers perform friendliness to get close to victims. FNAF uses performance as a mask, and every mask in the series feels a little dangerous once the lights go out. The office doors in the first game are unusually comforting and terrifying at the same time. They can save the guard, but they also make the room feel smaller, and they cannot remain closed forever. A fact like this belongs to the older campfire side of FNAF lore, where a single phrase or image can sit as a mind longer than a long explanation. This series became famous because it left enough darkness around its clues. A half-seen thing on a camera can be more powerful than a fully explained scene, especially when the building already feels haunted by absence. The camera system gives the night guard knowledge without true control. Seeing an animatronic on a feed does not stop it. The strongest thing about it is how it turns nostalgia unstable. Pizza places, arcade sounds, prize counters, birthday rooms, and cartoon mascots should belong to harmless memory. FNAF keeps those pieces recognisable, while changing the emotional weather around them. The result is not just horror, but a feeling that some childhood spaces were never as safe as they looked. The first phone guy gives instructions with casual workplace calm. His tone makes the danger stranger, because horrific rules are explained like ordinary company policy. It also shows the importance of repetition across the franchise. Characters return in withered forms, toy forms, nightmare forms, scrap forms, glam rock forms, digital forms, and copied forms. Each return changes the meaning of the original without fully replacing it. The series feels haunted because no design is allowed to remain only one thing. Phone Guy's death during the first game becomes one of the earliest lore shocks. The voice that seemed to understand the job suddenly becomes another victim of the building. The idea becomes more interesting when placed beside the company's endless rebranding. Fazbear history is full of reopening, repackaging, scanning, rebuilding, and pretending the past can be turned into entertainment. This fact quietly belongs to that cycle. It suggests that the brand survives by putting a new face over an old wound. Before moving deeper, it helps to hold the first restaurant in the mind for a moment. Not as a puzzle board, but as a place someone might once have trusted. The stage is small, the tables are cheap, the posters are bright, and the security office feels like an afterthought placed where no customer was meant to look. That ordinariness is the source of the fear. FNAF does not begin with a castle, a graveyard, or a cursed forest. It begins with a workplace. Someone has to sit through the night because a company has decided the building still needs protecting. The horror grows from that awful normality. If the rules are strange, the job still treats them as routine. If the animatronics move, there is still a paycheck. If someone died before, there is still a policy for what the next guard should do. This is the early genius of the series. The supernatural enters through employee training. The newspaper clippings in the first game hint at missing children. This is where the series begins shifting from survival horror into a buried crime story. It can also be read through the theme of trapped identity. Many FNAF characters are stuck in roles they did not choose. Children inside suits, workers inside systems, copies inside code, machines repeating learned behaviour, or family members pulled back toward old crimes. The fact becomes another small example of identity caught inside a costume. The idea of haunted animatronics gives the first game its sadness. The machines are frightening, but the implication that children may be trapped inside them makes the horror mournful rather than only mechanical. The unease comes from how much the series trusts implication. FNAF does not need to show every violent detail directly. A sound, a newspaper clipping, a toy, a locked room, or a damaged mask can suggest enough. This fact joins that tradition, letting the mind complete what the screen leaves unfinished. The phrase bite of 87 became one of the earliest mysteries. It was mentioned before the story had full context, which made it feel larger than the information available. It matters because the franchise keeps asking whether technology preserves or distorts the human. Recordings preserve voices, Remnant preserves something like souls, code can preserve behaviour, and animatronics preserve performances long after the performers are gone. The fact sits inside that question, where memory and machinery keep touching in uncomfortable ways. Typing 1987 into the first game's custom night triggers Golden Freddy. That secret helped turn the game into a rumour machine, because hidden reactions made every number and detail feel suspicious. There is also a theatrical quality to it. FNAF often stages horror like a show that has continued after closing time. Curtains, stages, music boxes, spotlights, costumes and programmed routines all remain, but the dining room is empty. The night guard becomes the unwilling witness to a performance that should have ended years ago. Golden Freddy behaves less like a normal animatronic and more like an apparition. The limp yellow suit, sudden appearance, and unstable rules make it one of the series' earliest supernatural symbols. The detail helps explain why the series is so theory-friendly. It is specific enough to matter, but open enough to connect with other clues. FNAF fans learn to treat dates, colours, sounds, names and tiny changes as possible evidence because the games rewarded that kind of attention again and again. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is a prequel despite being the second release. That twist showed early that the series would not tell its story in a straight line. Its emotional force comes from the way FNAF turned safety systems into fragile rituals. Closing a door, putting on a mask, winding a box, rebooting ventilation, hiding in a booth, or watching a camera can feel comforting for a second. Then the comfort starts draining away. The fact lives inside that temporary safety, where survival is always borrowed. FNAF 2 introduced the toy animatronics. The brighter plastic faces make the company look as if it tried to cover old fear with new design. The series also uses this kind of detail to make time feel broken. Events from different decades echo through similar rooms, similar costumes, and similar company decisions. A new location never feels entirely new. It feels like another layer placed over the same buried story, with older voices still pressing upward. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie and Toy Chica look safer than the originals. That safety is exactly what makes them uncanny, because polished friendliness cannot erase the darkness underneath. It is worth holding gently because a FNAF's horror often depends on compassion as much as fear. The animatronics can be terrifying, but the reason they matter is tied to loss. If they were only machines, the story would be simpler. Because they may be haunted, copied, or shaped by pain, their movements become harder to dismiss. Mangle is one of the most disturbing designs in FNAF 2. The character is already broken before danger begins, suggesting neglect has become normal inside the restaurant. The fact has a quiet place in the lore, because it shows how ordinary business language can become sinister. Policies, attractions, repairs, openings, closures, paychecks, and training tapes all sound mundane until the history behind them appears. FNAF makes Bureaucracy feel haunted, as if the paperwork itself knows what happened. Balloon Boy is frightening without being physically imposing. He disables the flashlight, making helplessness his real weapon. It also belongs to the franchise's long fascination with hidden rooms and hidden layers. safe rooms, underground facilities, back areas, maintenance spaces, server systems, and digital overlays all suggest that the public restaurant is only the surface. The real story keeps happening behind, beneath, or inside the place people are meant to see. The puppet changes the emotional meaning of the series. It is connected to protection, grief, and the idea that possession may come from a child's response to violence. This detail supports the idea that FNAF is about repetition with decay. The same cheerful premise returns, but each return is more damaged, more self-aware, or more technologically strange. The restaurants do not simply reopen, they reopen carrying rot in a new costume. That is why the series can keep changing while still feeling like one haunted building. The music box in FNAF 2 creates constant background pressure. It forces attention away from immediate threats and toward a responsibility that cannot be ignored. It feels memorable because the franchise lets unanswered discomfort remain in the room. A clear answer can end a thought, but an almost answer keeps echoing. FNAF often gives enough information to feel close to the truth, then leaves one shadowed corner untouched. This fact lives in that corner, half lit by the stage lamps. Withered animatronics reveal older, damaged versions of familiar characters. Their torn shells and exposed frames make the restaurant's past look physically present. The detail also reveals how the series turns children into the moral centre without making the world gentle. Birthday imagery, toys, drawings, and small voices appear beside murder, possession, neglect, and cover-ups. That contrast makes the horror feel wrong in a deeper way. The place was meant to protect wonder, and instead it became the thing wonder had to survive. FNAF 2 includes death minigames that deepen the lore. Their simple pixel style makes the violence feel like memory, not spectacle. It works as another reminder that FNAF's monsters are rarely isolated from adults who failed. Parents miss signs, companies hide crimes, technicians build dangerous machines, owners reopen cursed locations, and killers exploit trust. The animatronics are the visible horror, but the human systems around them are often where the tragedy begins. The purple guy appears through the minigames before his full identity becomes clear. His early mystery worked because the series showed the shape of guilt before giving it a full name. The fact becomes softer and stranger when thought of as part of a ghost story told through machines. Instead of candles and old houses, FNAF uses servos, cameras, vents, endoskeletons, training programs, and security systems. The haunting is modern, but the ache is old. The dead want to be known, and the living keep trying not to listen. As the story moves into earlier restaurants and brighter redesigns, the tone becomes even more uncomfortable. The toy animatronics look newer, rounder, shinier, and more publicly acceptable, but they do not make the building feel healed. They make it feel as if a company tried to solve moral rot with plastic cheeks and fresh paint. That is one of the great Fazbear patterns. When something terrible happens, the answer is rarely confession. The answer is a new location, a new band, a new policy, a new face for the same old performance. The withered animatronics sit behind that effort like evidence that was never properly buried. Their broken bodies say what the toy designs are trying not to say. The past is still in the building, even if the posters have changed. FNAF 2's paycheck places the game in 1987. That detail helped confirm the timeline and tied the second game to the famous bite mystery. Its place in the lore also shows how FNAF balances comedy and dread. The names can be goofy, the mascots can look absurd, and the premise can sound almost silly from far away. Then the lights go down, and the same silliness becomes uncanny. That tonal turn is one of the franchise's oldest tricks. Jeremy Fitzgerald is the main night guard for most of FNAF 2. His name became part of a larger pattern, where guards, victims and aliases all invite suspicion. The series keeps returning to this kind of fact because it allows the story to feel discovered rather than simply told. A clue found in a menu, minigame, file, poster or hidden ending feels different from a plain explanation. Discovery makes the haunting feel participatory, as if every camera feed might be hiding one more piece of the old story. Fritz Smith appears on the custom night paycheck. The shared surname with later lore around the missing children made fans pay close attention to names. It matters because the franchise often makes bodies into containers. Suits contain performers, animatronics contain endoskeletons, machines contain memories, games contain code, and code contains copied behaviour. The outer face is never the whole truth. Something is always inside, and that inside thing is rarely at peace. FNAF 3 moves the setting to Fazbear's Fright. The horror attraction turns tragedy into entertainment, which is one of the franchise's sharpest ideas. The detail settles into the wider pattern of Fazbear spaces being too cheerful for what they hold. A prize counter, stage, arcade, or party room can become eerie because its purpose is so innocent. FNAF does not remove the innocence. It lets the innocence remain visible while the danger moves behind it. Springtrap is the only active physical animatronic enemy in FNAF 3. That focus makes him feel heavy, personal, and unavoidable. There is a reason facts like this keep returning in fan conversations. They are small enough to debate and large enough to imply a hidden structure. FNAF encourages that feeling. The sense that one overlooked phrase might rearrange an entire timeline if it is placed beside the right minigame or book story. Springtrap contains William Afton's corpse. The killer becomes trapped inside the costume he used, turning disguise into punishment. The emotional centre remains the same even when the continuity shifts. Whether the story is in the games, novels, anthology books, film, VR, or newer Mimic-era material, the same questions return. Who was hurt? Who hid it? What did the machines keep? And why does Fazbear keep opening the door again? Springlock suits are both costumes and animatronics. Their dual purpose is terrifying because one object tries to hold performer and machine at once. This fact feels most unsettling when imagined after closing time. During the day, a mascot can be part of a brand. At night, the same mascot becomes a shape with too much history. FNAF's genius is understanding that darkness does not create the fear by itself. It reveals what the daylight was covering. A springlock failure can crush the person inside the suit. This turns mascot technology from stage equipment into bodily horror. It also joins the franchise's long argument between memory and denial. Spirits remember, victims remember, machines remember, fans remember, but Fazbear Entertainment tries to turn everything into another attraction. The more the company packages the past, the more the past seems to leak through the packaging. FNAF 3 uses phantom animatronics as hallucination-like threats. They cannot kill directly in the same way, but they disrupt systems and make the building feel mentally contaminated. The fact is another small proof that FNAF's timeline is less like a straight road and more like a building full of locked doors. Some doors open into the past, some into alternate continuities, some into symbolic echoes, and some into future technology. The mystery comes from walking those halls carefully. The good ending in FNAF 3 implies the children's souls can be freed. The empty masks with dark eyes give the series one of its earliest images of possible release. It is effective because it lets horror emerge from procedure. Check the light, close the door, win the box, wear the mask, repair the system, follow the company message. The task sounds clear, but the history behind the task is not. FNAF makes instructions feel like evidence of older disasters. FNAF 4 moves fear into a child's bedroom. This shift from restaurant to home makes the mascots feel like nightmares carried inward. The detail keeps the mood grounded in the strange sadness of entertainment that outlives joy. A stage can remain after the children leave. A song can play after the party is over. A costume can keep smiling after everyone knows what happened. That leftover cheer is where much of the franchise's atmosphere gathers. Nightmare animatronics exaggerate familiar designs into teeth and claws. They look like childhood fear reshaping mascots into impossible predators. It belongs to the larger question of whether evil in FNAF is a person, a pattern, or a thing that can be copied. William Afton matters enormously, but the newer lore asks whether learned cruelty can survive without him. This fact sits somewhere along that line, between individual guilt and repeating design. The crying child is central to FNAF 4's emotional mystery. His fear, family and birthday tragedy form one of the franchise's most debated story knots. The franchise makes this kind of detail glow because it rarely gives comfort without unease. Even a friendly version of Freddy, a helpful voice, or a safe-looking room can carry uncertainty. Safety in FNAF is usually temporary, conditional, and surrounded by systems that may fail at the worst possible moment. Fredbear becomes especially important in FNAF 4. The golden bear moves from hidden mystery to the centre of a devastating bite. It also shows why the animatronics became icons. They are simple enough to recognise instantly, but flexible enough to carry many meanings: mascot, corpse, ghost, robot, costume, brand, friend, enemy, copy, and memory. A good FNAF fact usually touches more than one of those meanings at once. The bite of 83 is strongly tied to FNAF 4. A child's head being placed in Fredbear's mouth turns a cruel prank into lifelong tragedy. The detail can rest near the centre of the old mystery, because FNAF turns absence into presence. Missing children, missing records, missing rooms, missing context, and missing answers all become active parts of the story. What is not shown can feel as heavy as what jumps from the dark. By the time Springtrap appears, the story has turned the mascot suit into a tomb. That shift is important because the killer is no longer outside the machine. He is inside it, trapped by the same disguise that helped him approach children. FNAF often works through this kind of reversal. A safe room becomes unsafe, a costume becomes a prison, a children's character becomes evidence, a company attraction becomes a mausoleum with ticket sales. Fazbear's Fright is especially sharp because it turns old tragedy into entertainment on purpose. The attraction is built from rumours, props, and recovered objects, as if the company and the public have both learned how to consume fear without respecting the victims underneath it. Springtrap is the thing they should never have put on display, still breathing in the ruins of a brand that keeps mistaking danger for nostalgia. The older brother's foxy mask became one of the series' memorable images. It shows how childish cruelty can borrow the face of a mascot. It matters because FNAF lets corporate denial become almost supernatural. The cover-up does not stay in offices and paperwork. It becomes haunted attractions, scanned circuit boards, training programs, reopened restaurants, and products built from old tragedies. Denial gains machinery and machinery starts moving. Plush Fredbear speaks in cryptic lines. Its presence makes the boundary between toy, surveillance, memory, and supernatural comfort hard to define. This fact also touches the franchise's grief around families, the Aftons, the Emilys, film versions of Mike and Abby, and many book characters all show private pain-feeding public horror. The restaurant is a business, but the wound behind it is often domestic. A child lost, a parent broken, a sibling guilty, a home unable to heal. Sister Location changes the formula by moving underground. The facility feels less like a restaurant and more like a hidden machine built beneath the story. It becomes eerie because the series keeps asking for a second look. A character who seemed like a robot may be a victim. A game that seemed like fiction may be an in-universe cover-up. A villain who seemed dead may be preserved as code, memory, or imitation. FNAF's facts are rarely final on first sight. Circus Baby is both charming and dangerous. Her voice can sound gentle while the design hides a lethal purpose. The detail has a final quiet strength. It makes the building feel inhabited by consequences. Every room, costume, and recorded line seems to carry something forward. Even when the location changes, the old consequence follows. That is why the stage never feels fully clear, no matter how many times the lights go off. Michael Afton is scooped and worn by Enard. That grotesque twist makes the human body itself become a costume, which is one of the franchise's darkest reversals. The series has always been about suits hiding terrible things, but here the hiding place becomes a living person. It is not only body horror, it is identity horror. Michael walks back into the world as a shell being used by something else, and the image fits the Afton family's larger curse. Their grief, guilt, and crimes do not stay politely inside memory. They keep finding bodies, masks, wires, rooms, and voices to inhabit. Michael survives after Enard leaves him. His survival pushes the story into strange territory where death, decay, and purpose overlap. He is not alive in the ordinary way, but he is not simply gone either. That middle state matters because Michael becomes a walking consequence of what his father built. His body has been ruined by the same underground machinery connected to his family's secrets, yet he continues moving with a mission. FNAF often treats survival as unfinished business rather than victory. Michael's continued existence feels less like healing and more like a long, exhausted search for a way to end what should never have begun. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator hides lore under a business game. At first it seems like running a small restaurant, buying attractions, placing arcade cabinets, and balancing risk against profit. Slowly, the cheerful management layer becomes a lure. The building is not being grown into a dream restaurant, it is being prepared like a sealed box. That is why the tycoon structure works so well. Every purchase feels innocent until the plan underneath becomes clear. The business interface turns into a moral disguise, mirroring the way Fazbear history has always hidden terrible things behind menus, mascots, coupons, and family entertainment. Henry Emily's final speech is one of the franchise's clearest moments. He gathers guilt, grief, and responsibility into a single attempt to end the cycle. What makes the speech land is how tired it feels. Henry is not boasting about winning. He sounds like someone who has carried knowledge too long and finally chosen fire, because every cleaner solution has failed. The speech gives names and shape to pain that had often been hidden in minigames, symbols and fragments. It feels like a funeral, a confession, and a controlled demolition at once, with a father trying to release children, monsters, and himself from a building made of old mistakes. Lefty is built to capture the puppet. The design hides containment inside another bear mascot, making imprisonment look like entertainment. That idea is painfully fitting for the puppet, because the puppet had already been tied to protection, grief, and the spirits of children. Lefty turns that protector into something trapped for the sake of Henry's final plan. It is not a simple villain design. It is a sad machine with a sad purpose, built by someone who believes containment may be the only remaining mercy. The calm black bear suit becomes another reminder that in FNAF, even rescue can look frightening from the outside. Scrap Baby shows Elizabeth's continued presence in a broken body. Her jagged design suggests a childlike mascot hardened into something sharp and vengeful. The roller skates, claw, wires and torn face make her feel like a toy rebuilt from anger. That matters because Elizabeth's tragedy is not only that she died, it is that she became attached to the very machine that was designed to lure and kill. Scrap Baby's pride in her father and her desire to make him proud give the horror a family shape. She is not merely dangerous metal. She is a daughter still caught inside the approval of a man who destroyed her. The bedroom era changes the shape of the fear again. In the restaurant games, danger belongs to a public place after closing. In the nightmare world, danger has followed a child home. The bed, closet, hallway and doorways make the horror smaller and more intimate. There is no paycheck in that room. There is no company policy to blame while the dark gathers around a child's breathing. The nightmare animatronics feel exaggerated because fear itself exaggerates. A familiar mascot does not need to obey practical design when it has been rebuilt by panic. Teeth lengthen, shadows deepen, and the bedroom becomes a little theatre of helplessness. This part of FNAF matters because it shows that trauma does not stay politely inside the restaurant where it began. Molten Freddy carries the remains of Anar after Baby is removed. The tangled wires and bear mask make him feel like a chorus reduced to scrap. Unlike the cleaner animatronics from earlier locations, Molten Freddy looks almost impossible to organise. He's a bundle of voices, histories and machinery that has lost the comforting shape of a stage character. That messiness is the point. The franchise has spent years showing souls, memories, code and metal tangled together, and Molten Freddy gives that tangle a body. He does not feel like a mascot anymore. He feels like everything hidden inside the mascot finally spilling out. Scraptrap is another ruined form of William Afton. His return reinforces the idea that the killer keeps surviving through increasingly damaged bodies. By this point, his persistence has become disgusting rather than impressive. Every return strips away more of the charm and control that once made the yellow rabbit useful to him. What remains is stubbornness in a broken shell. Scraptrap matters because he shows that Afton's refusal to die is not grand immortality. It is rot continuing to move. The body is worse, the disguise is worse, and the evil is still trying to call itself alive. Ultimate custom. Night gathers characters from across the franchise. It feels less like a normal restaurant and more like a punishment made from memory. The impossible roster turns the series into a nightmare archive, where enemies from different eras can attack in the same looping space. That unreality is what makes the mode meaningful to the lore. It does not need to behave like a physical building. It behaves like torment, with every familiar face turned into another reminder that the past has not forgiven the person trapped inside it. The chaos becomes personal, as if the franchise itself has become a locked room. Many fans interpret Ultimate Custom Night as torment for William Afton. The endless attacks turn the animatronic cast into a personal hell of repetition. That reading gives the difficulty a story purpose. Each reset becomes less like a new attempt and more like a sentence being carried out again and again. The office is no longer just a workplace. It becomes a chamber of consequence crowded with the shapes his crimes helped create. Whether every detail is literal or symbolic, the emotional idea is clear. Afton wanted to keep coming back, and now returning may be the punishment rather than the escape. The phrase, "the one you should not have killed," became a major theory point. It suggests a specific spirit with enough anger to hold the punishment together. The wording is powerful because it sounds personal, almost intimate, as if one victim has become the centre of a storm. FNAF often leaves names and identities uncertain long enough for the uncertainty itself to become part of the fear. Here, the mystery is not just who the spirit is, it is what kind of pain could refuse rest so completely. The line turns vengeance into a presence, quiet and fixed, watching from inside the endless night. The Fazbear Fright's books introduced many parallel horror stories. They do not simply retell the games, but they echo themes of possession, grief, punishment, and cursed entertainment. Their strength is that they widen the franchise's emotional vocabulary. A story can focus on a single object, a single family, a single wish, or a single punishment. Then let that smaller nightmare reflect the larger mythology. The books make FNAF feel less like one restaurant history, and more like a haunted pattern that can appear wherever entertainment, denial, and pain meet. They are strange side corridors, but many of them led back toward the same dark building. Into the Pit became one of the most famous Fazbear Fright stories. Its ball pit memory world turns nostalgia into a doorway toward violence. That image works because a ball pit should be one of the softest, safest objects in a child's restaurant. It should mean noise, colour, play, and harmless hiding. Instead, it becomes a tunnel into an older wound. The story understands one of FNAF's central fears. Childhood places can preserve things adults want forgotten. The past is not reached through a dusty archive. It waits beneath plastic balls in a place built for laughter. The man in room 1280 strongly shaped Afton theories. Its story of a burned man kept alive by supernatural anger echoes debates around William's fate. What makes the story unsettling is the medical stillness around something that should be impossible. A hospital room, machines, nurses, and clinical language surround a body that appears to be held in a state beyond ordinary life. That contrast gives the horror a colder texture. The question is no longer only whether evil can survive inside a mascot suit. It becomes whether pain itself can keep a person suspended between death, punishment, and release. The Stitch Wraith storyline connects several Fazbear Frights threads. It gives the book series its own strange spine of agony, remnant, and lingering souls. Figure feels like a wandering collection of unfinished stories, stitched together in more ways than one. That is why it fits the book so well. The anthology format could have felt scattered, but the Stitch Wraith gives the scattered pain a shadow moving between tales. FNAF has always been about fragments, minigames, recordings, newspaper clippings, masks, names, rumours. The Stitch Wraith turns fragmentation into a character, carrying pieces of hurt through the dark. Remnant is one of the franchise's most important supernatural concepts. It suggests that memory, soul, and emotion can become attached to metal in ways science and haunting overlap. The idea is disturbing because it makes machinery feel morally alive. Metal is no longer only material, it can be a container for suffering. That gives the franchise a strange bridge between ghost story and experiment. Afton is not simply dealing with superstition, and Henry is not simply dealing with engineering. They are both trapped in a world where the spiritual and mechanical have fused, and every attempt to control that fusion creates more damage. Agony is another recurring concept in the books. Pain itself can leave an imprint, making suffering feel almost material. This idea is important because it explains why certain objects in FNAF seem heavy with more than age. A toy, a suit, a mask, or an animatronic part can feel charged by what happened around it. The horror becomes less about a ghost choosing one clean vessel, and more about emotion staining the world. Agony makes trauma environmental. It suggests that cruelty does not vanish when the event ends. It soaks into things, waits, and sometimes moves again. The Silver Eyes trilogy gives a separate novel continuity. Charlie, John, and the novel version of Afton explore familiar ideas through a different timeline. Its value comes from how much more directly it can sit with character memory. The games often hide emotion inside mechanics and clues, while the novels can let people speak, remember, doubt, and misunderstand each other across longer scenes. That does not make the novels a simple answer key. It makes them another room in the same haunted house, where familiar names are rearranged so the themes of grief, identity, and artificial life can breathe differently. Charlie Emily is central in the novels and connected to Henry's grief. Her story turns robotics, memory, and parental love into something both tender and disturbing. What makes Charlie's novel arc so painful is the idea of love trying to rebuild what death took away. In another story, that might sound miraculous. In FNAF, it becomes fragile, uncanny, and deeply sad. Henry's grief does not simply mourn a child, it tries to preserve her through creation, and creation becomes its own kind of haunting. Charlie's identity asks whether being lovingly made can still leave someone trapped inside another person's refusal to let go. The games and books do not always share one direct continuity. That uncertainty is part of why FNAF theories often compare echoes instead of simple confirmations. The important thing is not that every scene lines up like a straight road. It is that names, wounds, machines, fathers, children, restaurants, and experiments keep returning in altered forms. The books often behave like distorted reflections, showing what a theme looks like from another angle. That can be frustrating for anyone wanting a single clean map, but it also suits FNAF's mood. The franchise has always felt like a story glimpsed through cameras that never show the whole room. Sister Location opens a different kind of darkness beneath the franchise. The underground facility feels planned, controlled, and technically advanced in a way the earlier restaurants did not. The danger is not only that old spirits are restless, the danger is that someone built machines with terrible purpose from the beginning. Circus Baby and the Fun Time line carry charm, voice, performance, and lethal design together. Their polish is cold. They feel like products from a mind that understood children well enough to exploit their trust. This makes Sister Location one of the saddest turns in the series. It connects family tragedy to engineered harm, and it suggests that the nightmare was not always an accident of haunting. Sometimes the machine was made wrong on purpose. Help Wanted reframes old games as in-universe recreations. This clever move lets Fazbear Entertainment turn its own scandals into marketable horror. The company is not only denying the past anymore, it is packaging the denial as an experience. That makes the VR premise especially sharp. Tragedy becomes a brand asset, and fear becomes something sold back to the public with a playful warning label. The old locations are no longer only haunted buildings, they are content. That shift makes Fazbear Entertainment feel more modern and more chilling, because it has learned how to profit from the rumour of its own guilt. Glitch Trap appears through Help Wanted. The yellow rabbit in the digital world suggests that old evil can move through code, not only through suits. That changes the texture of Afton's legacy. The danger is no longer limited to a locked room, a spring-lock suit, or a physical body hidden behind walls. It can appear as a file, a gesture, a dancing figure in a virtual space, a presence that follows through technology. Glitch Trap makes the old mascot shape feel newly contagious. The rabbit is not only returning, it is adapting to the systems built to explain, simulate, and sell the past. Tape Girl's recordings build Help Wanted's mystery. Her hidden messages make the VR game feel infected by something the company tried to package. The tapes matter because they turn a polished virtual product into a confession booth. Under the clean interface is a worker trying to warn whoever comes next. That is a very FNAF kind of storytelling. The official surface says one thing, while a buried recording says another. Tape Girl's voice becomes a small human thread inside a digital maze, proof that someone noticed the wrongness before the wrongness found a new way to spread. Vanny becomes linked to Glitch Trap's influence. Her rabbit imagery shows how the old Afton shape can recruit new hands. This is frightening because it turns legacy into possession without needing the same body. The costume is homemade, uneven, and almost childish, which makes it feel different from the corporate mascots around it. Vanny looks like someone imitating a nightmare rather than simply wearing an official character suit. That imitation matters. Evil in the newer era is not only preserved, it can persuade, copy itself into behaviour, and make another person act out the shape of an old crime. Security Breach moves the series into the mega Pizzaplex. The setting is huge, bright and commercial, making Fazbear horror feel like mall entertainment on a massive scale. That shift matters because the franchise is no longer confined to a cramped office or a single restaurant map. The danger now lives inside escalators, Attractions, branded zones, food courts, service tunnels, daycare rooms and hidden basements. Everything is bigger, shinier, and more automated, but the size does not make the place safer. It makes the company feel more powerful. Fazbear Entertainment has not escaped its past. It has built a palace over it. Gregory is the central child protagonist of Security Breach. His smallness against the Pizzaplex makes the building feel enormous. Earlier FNAF stories often placed adults in night shift roles, but Gregory's point of view makes the danger feel more immediate and physical. He's not clocking in for a job. He is trying to get through the night inside a complex designed to overwhelm children with lights, sounds, games, and mascots. That contrast gives the Pizzaplex a strange cruelty. The place was built to entertain someone his size, yet it becomes a maze that can swallow him. Glamrock Freddy becomes an ally rather than a main enemy. This role reversal gives Freddy one of his gentlest and most memorable versions. For a series where the bear mascot usually represents approaching danger, his protectiveness feels almost disarming. He becomes shelter, transport, warning system, and emotional support inside a building full of threats. That does not make him simple, it makes him poignant. A Fazbear machine finally behaves the way the brand always claimed its mascots were meant to behave: protective, kind, and devoted to a child. The sadness is that this goodness appears inside a company that still cannot be trusted. Glamrock Chica turns hunger and stage performance into horror. Her ruined form later makes the glossy mascot image feel fragile. She begins as a bright performer inside a polished entertainment complex, but her constant searching and eating make her feel driven by a need that has lost its innocence. When she breaks down, the glamour collapses into exposed damage. That image suits Security Breach's larger mood. The Pizzaplex looks expensive and controlled, until its performers begin to show the stress fractures underneath. Chica's design makes the mall's shine feel temporary, like makeup over malfunction. The daycare attendant splits into sun and moon. That duality turns childcare into a sudden shift between overwhelming cheer and pursuit. Sun is frantic, bright, and controlling in a way that already feels slightly too intense. Moon takes the same space and makes it predatory. The daycare should be one of the safest parts of the Pizzaplex, padded and colourful and built around children, but the light switch changes the whole emotional meaning of the room. It is a perfect Security Breach idea. The same attraction can feel silly, exhausting, and terrifying depending on which system is awake. DJ Music Man uses size as horror. His huge body crawling through arcade space makes entertainment architecture itself feel alive. Earlier FNAF fear often came from something squeezing into an office or vent, but DJ Music Man reverses the scale. The threat is too large for comfort, too massive for the space around him, and too playful in design to feel purely monstrous. That mixture makes him memorable. He turns an arcade into a tunnel system for a gigantic mascot body. The music, lights, and games do not soften him. They make the pursuit feel like the whole attraction has started moving. Staff bots make the Pizzaplex feel automated and watched. Their identical faces turn customer service into a low-level surveillance system. They are not as iconic as the main animatronics, but their sameness is exactly what makes them eerie. The building seems to have replaced ordinary workers with a swarm of simple machines that clean, patrol, block, report, and repeat. That gives the Pizzaplex a cold corporate texture. It is not just haunted by special mascots, it is managed by countless little faces that do not understand fear, only procedure. The blob, also called Tangle by many fans, gathers old faces and wires. It looks like Fazbear history knotted together beneath the newest building. The image is powerful because the Pizzaplex is so modern above ground. Bright branding, big attractions and glossy surfaces sit over a mass of older shapes that should have been left behind. The blob feels like buried continuity made physical. Not a clean museum of the past, but a tangled thing of masks, cables and remembered terror. It suggests that the franchise's history cannot be paved over. It will gather underneath until something disturbs it. Burn Trap appears in one security breach ending. His presence suggested that the old Afton image still haunted the basement of the franchise. What makes the moment important is not only the body, but the location. The polished Pizzaplex has a deep underside, and down there the story finds old fire, old machinery, and an old silhouette trying to move again. Even as later lore complicates what that presence means, the image captures a major fear of the modern era. The company can build bigger and brighter, but the thing underneath may still be waiting below the floor. The fire and salvage era feels like the franchise trying to gather its ghosts into one room. Pizzeria Simulator begins with a strange little business premise, almost comic in its simplicity, but underneath that surface is Henry's final trap. The restaurant manager buys attractions, manages risk, salvages broken characters, and gradually realizes the building itself is a lure. This is FNAF at its most ritualistic. Everyone who should have been left behind is drawn back toward a final enclosure. William, Elizabeth the puppet, Molten Freddy, and the history Henry can no longer endure. The ending speech lands because it sounds like a man who has spent years carrying responsibility and finally found a way to act. Whether the fire truly ends, everything becomes complicated later, but emotionally, that moment feels like a door closing with both mercy and grief inside it. Security Breach has multiple endings. Those endings helped fuel debate about what truly happened below the Pizzaplex. The different outcomes make the story feel unstable in a way that matches the building itself. Some endings seem playful, some bleak, some symbolic, and some more directly tied to the underground history. That uncertainty became part of the conversation around the game. In FNAF, endings are rarely only endings. They are clues about what the franchise wants to preserve, what it wants to question, and which door may open next. Ruin follows Cassie entering the damaged Pizzaplex. The DLC turns the bright mall into a collapsed memory of itself. That change gives the location a more mournful feeling. The attractions are no longer selling wonder at full brightness. They are broken, blocked, flooded, darkened, and half-remembered. Cassie moves through a place that already failed someone else, which makes every room feel like an aftermath. Ruin works because it lets the Pizzaplex age quickly. What was once overwhelming entertainment becomes wreckage, and the wreckage tells the truth more honestly than the advertisements did. Cassie is motivated by a call that seems to come from Gregory. That setup makes friendship and trust part of the danger. She does not enter the ruined Pizzaplex because she wants proof of a mystery, or because a company hired her. She enters because someone she cares about seems trapped. That emotional hook makes the deception cruel. FNAF often uses voices as guidance, but Ruin makes the guiding voice uncertain from the beginning. A call for help becomes a lure, and Cassie's kindness becomes the path that leads her deeper underground. The VANN mask changes how Cassie sees the environment. It turns the ruined building into two overlapping realities: the broken physical Pizzaplex and the altered digital layer that reveals routes, messages, and impossible connections. That makes the mask more than a tool. It becomes a question about perception. Cassie can solve problems with it, but each use also makes the world feel less stable. FNAF has always cared about what cameras hide and reveal. Ruin updates that idea through augmented vision, where seeing more does not always mean understanding more. MXES acts as a security system in Ruin. Its rabbit-like shape complicates the old assumption that every rabbit image means the same evil. That complication is useful because it forces the newer lore to become less visually automatic. A rabbit silhouette no longer means the story can be solved in one glance. Sometimes the frightening shape may be a lock, not the thing being locked away. Ruin uses that uncertainty well, letting Cassie misread protection as threat. In a franchise built on faulty information, even the security system can look like the monster until the room is understood differently. The mimic becomes central to the newer lore. Its danger comes from copying behaviour, shifting the horror from possession alone toward imitation. That is a different kind of fear from a soul trapped in a suit. A possessed machine is haunted by someone. A mimicking machine can be haunted by patterns, by learned gestures, by violence repeated without understanding. The mimic makes the franchise feel more modern because it asks what happens when technology does not need a ghost to become dangerous. It only needs enough exposure to cruelty, enough memory of movement, and enough opportunity to repeat what it has learned. The Tales from the Pizzaplex books developed the mimic idea. Those stories connect modern Fazbear technology to old patterns of violence and learned behaviour. Their importance is that they give the Pizzaplex era a deeper root system. The Bright Mall does not simply appear as a new setting with new mascots. It grows out of experiments, corporate shortcuts, hidden systems, and old mistakes that have been automated. The Tales stories make the modern era feel less like a reboot and more like an evolution. The materials have changed, but the company still builds impressive things without fully understanding what it has buried inside them. Josh Hutcherson plays Mike in the FNAF movie. The film version centres his family trauma and protective relationship with Abby, which gives the adaptation a more openly emotional anchor. Instead of beginning only from workplace survival, the movie begins with a brother trying to hold the remains of a family together. That choice changes how Freddy's feels on screen. The restaurant is not just a cursed job site, it becomes another place where Mike's unresolved grief is waiting for him. His tiredness, guilt, and protectiveness give the film a human centre before the animatronics fully reveal what they are carrying. Matthew Lillard plays William Afton in the film. His casting gave the movie's killer a theatrical charm hiding something rotten. That charm matters because Afton has always depended on approachability in one form or another. The yellow rabbit is frightening after the truth is known, but before that truth, it is a friendly shape. The film version uses human warmth in a similar way, letting politeness and humour sit near danger. The performance works because the horror is not only that Afton is evil, it is that evil can know how to smile, offer help, and make itself seem harmless until the door has already closed. The book side of FNAF gives the lore another way to dream. The novels and anthology stories do not always fit the games in a simple one-to-one line, but they echo the same fears in different rooms. They ask what happens when grief becomes technology, when pain becomes substance, when a memory can be copied, when a child returns through a machine, or when an object carries more suffering than its surface should allow. This is why the books became so important to theory culture. They offer vocabulary for things the games often imply: remnant, agony, parallel lives, alternate versions, symbolic echoes. The books are not just extra facts. They are a laboratory where FNAF's deepest ideas can be tested in stranger shapes. The movie animatronics were built with help from Jim Henson's Creature Shop. That practical texture helped the mascots feel physically present rather than purely digital. This matters for FNAF because the fear has always depended on the uncomfortable weight of mascot bodies. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy need to feel like objects that could stand in a room, block a hallway, lean too close, or remain still for too long. Practical suits and puppeteer details give them that weight. The seams, fur, eyes, and heavy movement make the restaurant feel occupied by real figures rather than floating effects. The movie keeps the central idea of children's spirits inside animatronics. This preserves the sadness beneath the mascot horror. Without that sadness, the animatronics would only be monsters with recognizable faces. With it, they become frightening and pitiable at the same time. The film's version of the spirits gives the machines a childlike emotional logic, capable of trust, confusion, anger, loyalty, and manipulation. That keeps the story close to the franchise's heart. The suits are dangerous, but danger is not their first truth. Their first truth is that children were stolen from ordinary life and left inside a place that still pretends to be cheerful. The film changes details from the game continuity. Like the books, it works as a separate version that echoes the same core myths. That is why the changes can be useful rather than simply wrong. A movie has different needs from a hidden camera game or a clue-heavy novel. It needs faces, relationships, emotional through lines, and a structure that can be felt in one sitting. By shifting details while keeping missing children, haunted mascots, a disguised killer, and family grief near the centre, the film becomes another telling of the same nightmare rather than a replacement for the original one. FNAF became famous partly because of theory culture, hidden clues, ambiguous minigames, and uncertain timelines made interpretation part of the experience. The community did not simply watch the lore unfold, it helped build the way the lore was discussed. Every pixel colour, date, newspaper clipping, sound cue, eye glow, and repeated phrase could become evidence. That collective investigation fits the franchise because FNAF itself feels like a stack of security footage, rumours, corrupted memories, and company lies. The mystery became social. People gathered around the darkness, comparing small lights, trying to decide which shape they were seeing. MatPat's game theory videos helped popularise FNAF lore discussion. For many fans, watching theories became almost as important as playing the games. That influence matters because FNAF arrived at the perfect moment for internet detective work. The games were short enough to replay, strange enough to question, and hidden enough to reward obsessive attention. Theory videos gave shape to that attention. turning scattered clues into timelines and arguments that could be shared, challenged, revised, and remembered. Whether any single theory was right forever mattered less than the larger habit it created. FNAF became a mystery people solved together. Phone calls are one of FNAF's signature storytelling tools. They make exposition feel like workplace routine, which makes the horror oddly casual. Phone Guy does not speak like a grand narrator revealing ancient evil. He sounds like someone explaining a bad job, smoothing over impossible risks with tired friendliness. That tone is what makes the calls so effective. The terrible information arrives in the language of training, policy, and shift survival. The voice is human enough to comfort, but not powerful enough to protect. By the time the call ends, the building feels lonelier than before. Minigames often reveal the most important lore in simplified form. Their crude visuals make the events feel like memory, rumour, or symbolic reconstruction. That simplicity gives them power. A purple figure, a crying child, a puppet, a doorway, a car in the rain, or a small sprite moving through darkness can feel more disturbing than a detailed cutscene because it seems half-remembered. The minigames behave like fragments recovered from a damaged past. They do not explain everything cleanly. They show just enough for guilt and fear to take shape, then leave the mind to fill the empty pixels. FNAF often hides tragedy behind birthday imagery. Cake, presents, balloons, and party rooms become unsettling because they sit so close to death. The contrast is cruel in a very specific way. A birthday is supposed to mark a child growing older, becoming more visible, being celebrated by name. In FNAF, those same symbols often surround children who were denied any future birthdays at all. That is why the decorations feel haunted. The colours do not become frightening because they are dark. They become frightening because they remain bright around something unforgivable. The franchise repeatedly uses masks as symbols. A mask can be protection, disguise, identity, control, or the thin surface hiding a soul. In FNAF 2, wearing a mask can save a guard for a moment, but it also means surviving by pretending to be part of the same system that is hunting you. In other parts of the franchise, masks become linked to killers, children, performers, and followers. The symbol keeps changing because a mask is never only one thing. It can hide danger, hide fear, or hide the fact that the person underneath has already been changed. Doors are important across the series. A closed door promises safety, but it also admits that something outside wants in. The first game's doors are especially elegant because they make protection costly. Closing one feels comforting for a second. Then the power meter reminds the guard that safety cannot last forever. Later games changed the form of the doorway through vents, closets, hallways, curtains, and hiding spots. But the feeling remains. A barrier is never pure peace in FNAF. It is a temporary bargain with something patient on the other side. Cameras are equally important. FNAF often makes sight incomplete, delayed, grainy, or dangerous to depend on too much. Looking at a camera should feel like control, but the series turns it into anxiety. Every view shows only one slice of the building, while every unseen hallway becomes more threatening. The camera also creates a strange intimacy with the animatronics. They are distant, but close enough to watch. They are still until they are not. The fear comes from knowing that vision has limits, and those limits are where movement likes to hide. The series uses sound cues as survival information. Footsteps, laughter, music, vents, breathing, and static often matter as much as sight. This is why FNAF can feel so tense even when the screen is almost still. The ear starts working like a second security system. A laugh can mean position, a vent sound can mean danger, a music box can mean time running out. Breathing can mean that a door should not be opened. The franchise trains attention until every small noise feels like a message from the building itself. The fan name Purple Guy came before William Afton was widely understood. A simple pixel colour became one of the largest identities as a franchise. That early name shows how FNAF lore grew from fragments before it had clean labels. The community did not begin with a full biography. It began with a strange purple sprite appearing in scenes connected to death. The colour became shorthand for a murderer, then the murderer slowly gathered a name, family, motives, costumes, and consequences. Purple Guy is a reminder of the franchise's old mystery era, when a few pixels could carry an entire villain. William Afton is often associated with the phrase, "I always come back." The line became a summary of his refusal to stay dead. Its power comes from how simple and stubborn it is. It does not sound like a philosophy. It sounds like a habit, a threat, and a curse compressed into one sentence. Afton survives spring locks, fire, ruin, reinterpretation, and technological change because the franchise keeps making return part of his identity. Yet the line also makes him smaller in a way. He's not free. He's trapped in the same compulsion to return to the scene of his own evil. The VR and Pizzaplex era turns Fazbear Entertainment into something even more unsettling. A company that has learned to sell its own haunted reputation. Help Wanted suggests that past tragedies have been converted into game experiences, sanitized and monetized as if horror itself can be rebranded. Security Breach then expands that logic into the Mega Pizzaplex, a gigantic entertainment complex where every surface is themed, automated and commercial. The small haunted pizza place has become a mall-sized machine for attention, yet the same old pattern remains under the shine. Children are still unsafe, hidden systems still matter, and the company still builds over its own darkness. The scale changes, but the wound remains recognisable. Henry Emily serves as William's opposite in many readings. Both are tied to animatronic creation, but Henry's story bends toward guilt and attempted closure. That contrast gives the franchise one of its strongest moral shapes. William creates, uses, and returns because he wants control. Henry creates, loses, and finally burns because he wants release. Neither man is untouched by machines, but their relationships to those machines are different. Henry's tragedy is that his gifts became part of a nightmare he could not stop soon enough. His final plan feels heavy because it is not triumph. It is responsibility arriving very late. Fazbear Entertainment is almost a villain by itself. The company repeatedly reopens, rebrands, covers up and turns tragedy into products. What makes it unsettling is the blandness of its evil. It does not always need a dramatic monologue. Sometimes it only needs a training tape, a legal disclaimer, a reopening plan, or a cheerful corporate voice telling workers not to worry. The company gives the franchise a system around the killer, a way for damage to continue after one person's crime. Fazbear Entertainment is frightening because it can make horror sound like policy. The restaurant chain's constant reopening is part of the horror. It suggests that profit keeps resurrecting the setting, even when everyone should know better. A closed location should feel like an ending, but in FNAF closure often becomes a pause before a new version of the same mistake. The sign changes, the mascots change, the technology changes and the marketing changes, yet the old danger returns under fresh paint. That cycle makes the restaurants feel cursed in a corporate way. The curse is not only supernatural, it is the refusal to let a profitable brand stay buried. Children's drawings are a recurring visual clue. They make the restaurants feel haunted by the children they were meant to delight. A child's drawing is usually a harmless trace of affection, a mascot, a party, a friend, a bright room. In FNAF, those drawings become painful because they preserve trust. They show how the characters looked before the truth behind the place was known. The crayon softness makes the horror worse, not gentler. It reminds us that the victims were not lore pieces or mystery clues first. They were children who saw mascots as friends. The safe room is important in the Afton story. It is hidden from normal cameras and becomes the place where the killer's disguise finally traps him. The phrase itself is bitterly ironic. A safe room should mean protection, a place outside ordinary danger. In this story, it becomes the hidden chamber where crimes can be concealed, and where punishment finally closes around the person who used concealment for harm. The room's absence from normal surveillance also matters. FNAF often places the truth just outside the systems meant to record it, and the safe room is one of the clearest examples. The Spring Bonnie suit is one of the franchise's most cursed objects. It begins as a mascot and becomes a symbol of luring murder and punishment. The suit's horror comes from friendliness being weaponized. A rabbit character should be bright, soft and approachable, especially in a place built for children. Afton turns that trust into camouflage. Later, the same springlock design turns against him, making the costume both instrument and sentence. That double meaning is why the suit remains so central. It is the smiling face of the crime and the metal grave that answers it. Fredbear's family diner predates Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. That earlier restaurant gives the franchise a smaller, older origin point. It matters because the nightmare did not begin in its largest or most famous form. It began closer to a family business, a local stage, a smaller set of characters, and inventions that still carried wonder before the full weight of tragedy settled on them. Looking back to Fredbear's makes the franchise feel like a family photograph that has become difficult to look at. The beginning is not clean, but it is intimate, and that intimacy makes everything after it feel more tragic. The bite incidents are central because they turn mascot entertainment into bodily danger. A character designed for children becomes a machine capable of catastrophic harm. That idea sits at the root of FNAF's fear. The animatronics are not only scary because they move at night, they are scary because their daytime purpose was already too close to risk. Huge mechanical bodies performing near children, trusted because they smiled. The bites collapse the line between accident, negligence and horror. They make the restaurant's danger public for a moment, even if the company tries to fold that danger back into rumour afterward. FNAF often leaves exact dates debated. The uncertainty keeps the timeline alive, but it also means careful wording matters. Dates in this franchise are not just calendar labels. They are anchors people use to place restaurants, bites, missing children, paychecks, minigames, and family tragedies in relation to each other. When a year is clear, the story briefly feels solid. When a year is uncertain, the whole building shifts. That is why date debates can become so intense. A single number can move a character's guilt, a location's place, or the order in which the haunting unfolded. The custom night format became a recurring tradition. Adjustable difficulty turns the animatronics into a strange system of controlled chaos. It also gives the characters a mechanical personality. Increasing one animatronic's number does not simply make the game harder in a vague way. It changes the rhythm of the night. Someone moves more often, attacks more aggressively, or demands more attention. That format helped turn the cast into a set of recognizable pressures. The horror becomes almost musical, with each enemy adding a different beat until the office feels crowded by patterns. Jump scares are the surface language of FNAF, but the lasting fear usually comes from what the jump scare implies about the story behind it. The sudden face is only the release of pressure that has been building through footsteps, cameras, power loss, breathing, or silence. A good FNAF jump scare feels like a consequence arriving, not a random noise. It means a rule was missed, a system failed, or something moved faster than expected. That is why the fear can linger afterward. The shock fades quickly, but the question remains, what exactly reached the office, and why did it want to? FNAF's office spaces are usually small. That smallness makes every hallway, vent, door and camera feel like part of a body under pressure. The office is rarely a heroic command centre. It is a place to endure. A desk, fan, monitor, door button, flashlight, mask, or panel becomes important because there is so little room for error. The smallness teaches helplessness without making the night completely passive. There are choices to make, but all of them happen inside a box. FNAF's office design works because control and confinement sit in the same chair. FNAF World showed the franchise could become strangely playful. Even that bright spin-off carries hidden edges and odd lore connections. Its existence matters because it reveals the series' odd relationship with its own characters. Freddy and the others are horrifying in the main games, but they are also mascot designs with colours, jokes, attacks, upgrades, and charm. FNAF World leans into that toy box quality, then lets the unease slip in around the edges. The result feels like a dream where the monsters have become cute without becoming entirely safe. Ruin and the Mimic era shift the question from possession to imitation. That does not erase the old ghost story, it changes what the future can do with it. A haunted animatronic is frightening because someone remains inside. A copying machine is frightening because it can learn the shape of harm without needing the original soul. The mimic suggests that behaviour itself can become a contagion. If violence is modelled, repeated, hidden, and rewarded by the systems around it, then a machine can inherit the pattern even after the original killer is gone. This makes the newer lore feel colder in some ways, but also fresh. FNAF can move beyond William Afton without abandoning the theme of things returning in borrowed faces. Freddy in Space and other spin-off projects show Scott's playful side. The franchise often mixes jokes with horror, which helps the darker parts feel more surprising. That looseness is part of FNAF's identity. It can be grim and deeply tangled, then suddenly strange, goofy, or self-aware. The side projects remind us that the characters are strong enough to survive tonal shifts. Freddy can be a nightmare in one context, and a space shooter hero in another, yet the silhouette remains recognizable. That flexibility helped the franchise spread beyond one kind of fear. FNAF music and fan songs became a huge part of the fandom. Songs turned lore, grief, and theories into something people could remember emotionally. That mattered because music can simplify a complicated mystery without flattening its feeling. A song can take the fear of being trapped after midnight, the sadness of haunted children, or the menace of a smiling killer, and make it repeatable in a chorus. The fandom did not only analyse FNAF, it sang it back to itself. That musical afterlife helped the series feel larger than the games alone. The Living Tombstone's FNAF song became especially iconic. Its chorus helped define the early fandom's mood of haunted performance. The song works because it gives the animatronics a collective voice, turning them from silent threats into figures with history and complaint. It captures the strange blend of showmanship and suffering that made the first game feel so different. The melody is catchy, but the words point back toward being trapped, misunderstood, and forced to perform. That combination made it feel almost official in memory, even though it came from the fandom around the game. Cosplay and fan art helped the animatronics become cultural icons. The designs are readable at a glance, which makes them powerful beyond the games. A top hat, hook, rabbit ears, bib, puppet mask, or yellow suit can signal a whole corner of the franchise before a full scene appears. That clarity gives artists room to reinterpret the characters endlessly. They can be cute, tragic, monstrous, mechanical, elegant, broken, or funny, while still being recognizable. The fandom's visual creativity helped prove that FNAF's cast was not only scary, it was symbolically flexible. FNAF's simple character silhouettes are part of its success. Freddy's top hat, Foxy's hook, Bonnie's ears, and Chica's bib all make the cast instantly recognizable. Strong silhouettes matter in mascot horror because recognition has to happen quickly, sometimes in darkness, sometimes through a camera feed, sometimes in a doorway for only a second. The designs are friendly enough for a fake restaurant brand and sharp enough for fear. That balance is difficult. If they were too monstrous from the start, the childhood entertainment layer would disappear. If they were too harmless, the night would lose its teeth. The cupcake is a small but memorable part of Chica's identity. Even tiny props can become suspicious in a franchise where everything might be watching. The cupcake works because it is almost too cute for the room around it. Its candle, eyes, and little face make it feel like a party decoration that has become alert. That is very FNAF. The smallest object can start to feel charged if it belongs to the restaurant's strange ecosystem of mascots and props. Chica's cupcake turns birthday sweetness into another little witness on the table. Foxy's Pirate Cove curtain is one of the first game's strongest images. It turns waiting into dread, because a closed curtain can feel alive. The genius of Pirate Cove is that it gives Foxy his own miniature stage and his own rhythm. He is not simply another figure wandering the building. He is something hidden, checked on, neglected at your own risk, then suddenly running. The curtain creates anticipation before the attack ever happens. A small change in how open it looks can tighten the whole night, making stillness feel active. The Toreador March became tied to Freddy's danger. A cheerful classical tune becomes frightening when it means the power is gone. That is one of the first game's cleanest transformations. This song itself is not written as horror. but context changes it completely. In the dark office, with the doors dead and the lights gone, the tune becomes a countdown wearing a smile. Freddy's little performance is almost polite, which makes it worse. He does not need to rush. He can sing because the night has already been lost. Power failure in FNAF 1 is a perfect horror beat. The room goes dark, music plays, Freddy waits, and the guard can do nothing but listen. What makes it so strong is the removal of choice. For most of the night, survival depends on decisions. Check, close, open, conserve, react. When the power dies, decision turns into helplessness. The guard is left with darkness, sound, and timing. The moment feels almost theatrical, as if Freddy is taking a final bow before the inevitable. It is simple, memorable, and brutally effective. The phrase "it's me" became one of FNAF's earliest haunting messages. Its ambiguity makes it feel like a spirit trying to be recognized. The words are so short that they can point in several directions at once: accusation, identification, memory, confusion, or a childlike attempt to reach someone through the machinery. That openness is why the phrase lasted. It does not explain itself, but it feels intimate. In a building full of cameras, masks, and company messages, this tiny phrase sounds different. It feels personal, like the haunting has leaned close enough to whisper. FNAF's lore is powerful because it often speaks indirectly. A poster changes, a mini-game appears, a line sounds wrong, and the imagination fills the dark. The franchise rarely treats information like a clean lecture. It behaves more like a room with several lights burned out, where the shape of the truth has to be felt before it can be named. That indirectness lets small discoveries stay alive after the moment passes. A clue can seem harmless at first, then grow heavier when another game, book, or hidden scene gives it a new shadow. The film world shows how flexible the myth has become. The movie does not need to match every game detail exactly to feel like FNAF. It needs the restaurant, the animatronics, the missing children, the killer behind the friendly face, and the emotional wound of a family trying to survive. Practical animatronics help because the franchise has always depended on the physical wrongness of mascots that look almost lovable. The film also reminds us that FNAF is not only a puzzle, it is a ghost story about children, siblings, guilt, memory, and a place that should have been safe. Different continuities can change names and arrangements, but the central ache remains the same. Something bad happened in a place built for joy, and the machines never stopped carrying it. When all of these facts are placed together, the franchise begins to look less like a straight timeline, and more like a building with many locked rooms. One room holds the first night guard listening to a phone call. Another holds the puppet standing in the rain. Another holds William Afton inside a suit that has become his punishment. Another holds a child in a bedroom watching the door. Another holds Circus Baby speaking with a voice too calm for what she was built to do. The facts matter because every room changes the meaning of the next one. The oldest FNAF fear is still the simplest one. Something friendly is moving when it should not move. That idea never stops working because it is tied to trust. Children trust mascots, parents trust restaurants, employees trust company rules, customers trust bright signs and party rooms. FNAF begins where that trust fails. The animatronic does not need to look demonic in daylight. It only needs to keep smiling after the story has taught us what the smile might be hiding. The series also understands that horror can come from maintenance. So much of FNAF is about keeping systems alive for one more hour. Power, doors, lights, ventilation, audio, cameras, spring locks, music boxes, masks, backup power, and security protocols. These are not heroic actions. They are small acts of delay. The guard is rarely defeating evil in a grand way. The guard is surviving until morning. That humility gives the fear its tight shape. Another reason the law stays powerful is that it makes children central without turning them into simple symbols. The missing children are victims, but they are also presences. They haunt, confuse, attack, remember, and sometimes seek release. The story never lets their deaths become distant background. Every animatronic movement can be read through the pain of a child who should have gone home after a party and did not. William Afton remains effective because his evil hides behind familiarity. He's not a monster from outside the world of the restaurant. He is tied to its creation, its costumes, its rooms, its routines, and its trust. That makes him more frightening than a stranger in the dark. He understands the friendly surface well enough to use it. He turns the mascot into a tool of approach, and the franchise never fully recovers from that first corruption. Henry Emily gives the story its grief-stricken counterweight. If William represents creation twisted toward control and murder, Henry represents creation haunted by responsibility. His machines, restaurants, and choices are not innocent simply because he regrets what happened. That is what makes his final attempt at closure so heavy. It is not only revenge against William, it is a maker trying to answer for what his world allowed to happen. The company itself may be the most persistent horror in the entire franchise. Fazbear Entertainment keeps returning with new openings, new products, new attractions, new digital projects, and new ways to turn disaster into branding. A human killer can be trapped, burned, or copied, but the company pattern keeps surviving. That is why the restaurants feel cursed beyond the supernatural. Profit behaves like a ghost too, returning wherever memory can be repackaged. FNAF's clues are often small because childhood spaces are made from small things. Drawings, toys, prize tickets, birthday hats, posters, arcade sounds, and little songs. When those objects become evidence, the innocence of the setting changes. A child's drawing on a wall can feel more haunting than a long speech because it suggests a life that passed through the room before the room became a crime scene. The animatronics are frightening because they sit between categories. They are machines, costumes, mascots, possible graves, possible prisons, possible friends, possible copies, and possible witnesses. A single face can carry several meanings at once. Freddy is a brand icon, a stage performer, a threat, a symbol of the first game, and in some versions a protector. That layered identity is why the characters keep returning without becoming empty. The franchise's timeline can be confusing, but the emotional order is clearer. First comes trust, then betrayal, then concealment, then haunting, then reopening, then another attempt to explain, contain, or profit from what should have been mourned. Whether the exact year is 1983, 1987, 1993, or later, the emotional motion remains steady. Fazbear history is a cycle of damage covered by entertainment. The newer digital stories do not abandon the old haunted feeling, they update it. A ghost in a machine becomes a behaviour in a program, a scanned circuit board, a VR rabbit, or an endoskeleton that learns too well. The fear changes from who is possessing this body to what pattern has this machine absorbed. That shift matters because it lets FNAF ask a modern version of its oldest question. What remains after harm is copied enough times? The mimic is powerful because it makes the future less dependent on one man, while still acknowledging the shape he left behind. William Afton matters because he began so much suffering. But if a machine can imitate cruelty, and if a company can keep recreating the conditions where cruelty hides, then the horror can continue without needing William to physically return every time. The pattern becomes the monster. The movie version helps clarify what is emotionally essential. The lore can change details, but the story still needs a damaged family, a haunted restaurant, children who are lost, mascots that are both lovable and frightening, and a killer who used trust as camouflage. That is enough to make the myth recognizable. FNAF is flexible because its center is not one exact timeline chart. Its center is the wrongness of joy turned into a hiding place for death. Fan theories became part of the experience because the games left space for participation. A hidden screen, a strange sound, a date on a paycheck, a name in a book, a colour in a minigame, or a line from a phone call could become the beginning of a larger argument. The story was not only consumed, it was investigated. That made a FNAF feel communal, like a crowd standing outside the same locked safe room, trying to hear what moved inside. There is comfort in the repetition too. The office changes, the building changes, the cast changes, but the ritual returns. Look, listen, wait, react, survive. A horror series with so many twists still has a strangely steady heartbeat. The night begins, the systems hum, the mascots move, the clock is watched, morning is wanted. That repetition is why the facts can be listened to slowly. They circle the same haunted routine. The sadness beneath the scares is what gives the franchise its long life. If FNAF were only loud faces jumping from the dark, it would have burned out quickly. Instead, it keeps suggesting children who were not protected, families that broke, creators who failed, companies that lied, and machines that became vessels for what people refused to face. The jump scare startles the body. The sadness stays after the body calms down. Every era adds a different kind of mask. The original games use mascot heads and office doors. The middle games use nightmares, underground machinery, and salvage. The VR era uses digital rabbits and corporate cover stories. The Pizzaplex era uses celebrity mascots, security networks, and ruined attractions. The Mimic era uses imitation. Beneath all these masks is the same question. What is really looking back through the eyes? That question is why FNAF remains so easy to revisit. Each return can emphasize a different feeling. One night, the story feels like a murder mystery. Another night, it feels like family tragedy. Another, it feels like corporate satire. Another, it feels like ghost lore, artificial intelligence horror, or a strange fairy tale about children trapped inside singing animals. The franchise survives because its simple surface can hold many kinds of darkness. So the 150 facts do not need to close every door. They work better as lights along the hallway. One light falls on the first office, another on the puppet, another on Springtrap, another on Baby, another on Henry's Fire, another on Glitch Trap, another on the ruined Pizzaplex, another on the Mimic. Between those lights there is still darkness, and FNAF has always known how to let darkness do some of the storytelling. The final feeling is not only fear, It is the feeling of an old place that has been cleaned, reopened, renamed and relit too many times, while something under the floor still remembers. The signs may change, the mascots may be redesigned, the software may update, the company may apologize, joke, deny, or sell the legend back as entertainment. But after midnight, when the building grows quiet, the past has room to move again. One useful way to understand FNAF is to think of each game as another attempt to control the same impossible memory. The first game controls it with doors and cameras. The second controls it with a mask and a music box. The third controls it with ventilation, audio and failing systems. The fourth controls it through bedroom rituals. Sister Location controls it through instructions from a facility that seems to know more than it says. Each control method fails in its own way, because the memory underneath the machines is not really controllable. The old restaurants also carry a strange loneliness. They were designed for crowds, noise, birthdays and daytime attention, but the games mostly show them after hours. That absence is powerful. Party rooms without parties feel abandoned in a specific way. A stage without applause becomes less like entertainment and more like waiting. FNAF turns emptiness into pressure by suggesting that the building remembers what it was built for and what happened instead. The phrase night guard is important because it sounds ordinary. A night guard protects property. A night guard watches cameras. A night guard is supposed to deal with break-ins, not ghosts, corpses, haunted mascots or digital possession. The job title makes the horror feel unfair. The person in the office has been given the wrong explanation for the danger. That mismatch between the job and the truth is one of the franchise's oldest nightmares. FNAF also makes technology feel old very quickly. Cameras are grainy, speakers crackle, training tapes sound worn, arcade minigames look primitive, and even futuristic systems seem haunted by earlier design choices. This aging of technology matters. It makes the machines feel like artifacts rather than clean inventions. A robot in FNAF is rarely only advanced. It is usually already part of a history of damage, repair, and reuse. The children in the story are often present through traces rather than full scenes. A drawing, a voice, a minigame sprite, a mask, a party table, or a small ghostly figure can carry enormous weight because the absence around it is so large. The franchise understands that a missing child is not only a plot point, it is a hole in the world. The animatronics move around that hole, and every new location tries unsuccessfully to build over it. The Afton family gives the myth a domestic wound behind the public horror. William's crimes are public in consequence, but the story around Michael, Elizabeth and the crying child makes the nightmare feel rooted in a home that broke before the restaurants ever fully explained themselves. This matters because it keeps FNAF from being only a business conspiracy. It is also a family tragedy, where guilt, neglect, obsession, and grief echo through machines built for other people's children. The Emily side of the story gives that domestic wound a mirror. Henry's grief over Charlie, the puppet's protective role, and the final attempt to gather the remaining spirits all suggest a father trying to answer a loss that cannot be repaired. The contrast between Henry and William is not just good inventor against evil inventor. It is responsibility against possession, grief against control, and mourning against the refusal to stop. The series' use of fire is worth noticing. Fire appears as possible cleansing, destruction, release, and failed closure. Fazbear's Fright burns, Pizzeria Simulator ends in flame, and later stories continue asking whether burning the evidence truly ends the haunting. Fire feels dramatic because it promises finality. FNAF keeps complicating that promise. Some things burn and still leave data, agony, memory, or imitation behind. FNAF's restaurants often feel like stages for denial. The company can put up posters, train staff, print rules, sell pizza, hire guards, and tell the public that everything is safe. But the building itself disagrees. The cameras disagree. The sounds in the vents disagree. The children in the machines disagree. That tension between official calm and physical evidence gives the series its distinctive flavour of corporate horror. The fan experience became part of the law's atmosphere because each release felt like a new box of evidence. People inspected source code, brightened images, decoded minigames, compared book lines, counted toes, debated eye colours, and argued over pronouns. That obsessive attention may sound funny, but it fits the series perfectly. FNAF is a story about looking at haunted entertainment too closely until the cheerful surface gives way. There is something almost ritualistic about returning to the same kinds of rooms. Office, hallway, stage, parts and service, prize counter, arcade, kitchen, back room, bedroom, bunker, mall attraction, ruined corridor. The names change, but the feeling of moving through forbidden after-hours space remains. The repetition does not have to be lazy when it carries memory. In FNAF, repeated rooms feel like the franchise dreaming the same nightmare in different architecture. The newer stories around Imitation make the old tragedies feel less sealed. A copied behaviour can outlive the original motive. A learned pattern can repeat without understanding why it hurts people. That is a colder kind of horror than possession, but it fits the modern Fazbear world. A company that keeps scanning, recreating, and monetizing old material may accidentally teach its machines the very darkness it claims to have turned into fiction. Even after so many games, FNAF's strongest image may still be a still animatronic under weak light. Not attacking, not screaming, not moving yet. Just standing there with a face built for joy, and eyes that feel too aware. The pause before movement is where the series breathes. In that pause, every fact has time to gather. The missing children, the suits, the company, the killer, the code, the copy, the old songs, and the long wait until morning. The masks in FNAF deserve one last quiet look because they carry so many meanings at once. A mask can help someone survive, as in the second game. It can hide a killer, as with Spring Bonnie. It can become the face of his spirit, a company mascot, a performer, or a copycat machine. A mask is never only a face in this franchise, it is the question of who is allowed to disappear behind something friendly. The music matters in a similar way. The Toreador March, music boxes, stage songs, arcade sounds, and fan-made tracks all turn melody into memory. A tune can be comforting in one context and terrifying in another. FNAF understands that music is one of the fastest ways to make a place feel haunted, because a song can outlive the person who first heard it. When music plays in the dark, the building seems to be remembering for everyone. The idea of repair is also uneasy. Animatronics are fixed, patched, redesigned, salvaged, scanned, rebuilt, and repurposed, but repair rarely means healing. A repaired mascot can carry the same old problem under cleaner casing. A salvaged body can bring danger back into the restaurant. A scanned circuit board can carry something nobody meant to preserve. FNAF makes repair feel suspicious because the company keeps fixing objects while refusing to repair the truth. The guards and children are linked by vulnerability, even though their roles are different. The children trusted the place during the day. The guards are trapped inside it at night. Both discover that the restaurant's friendly surface does not protect them. This parallel gives the office horror a deeper sadness. The guard is not only defending against monsters, the guard is sitting inside the aftermath of a failure that began with children who had even less power. The franchise's comedy should not be ignored either. FNAF is often strange, goofy, and openly absurd. Helpy, mister. Hippo, trash mascots, odd minigames, fake corporate cheer, and ridiculous character names all sit beside murder and grief. That mixture is part of the identity. The humour does not break the horror. It makes the world feel more like a warped entertainment brand where silliness and tragedy have been forced to share the same stage. What keeps the facts from becoming only complicated is the emotional simplicity underneath them. Someone was hurt, someone lied, something was built to entertain, something inside it remembered. The details can branch into books, films, games, endings, codes, and theories, but the core remains easy to feel. That is why new people can enter the franchise through almost any doorway and still understand the basic wrongness of the place. The slowest way to hold FNAF is not to solve it all at once, but to let the rooms pass one by one. The first office, the second restaurant, the horror attraction, the bedroom, the bunker, the fake pizzeria, the VR game, the Pizzaplex, the ruined mall, the workshop. Each space adds another layer of fear, but each still returns to the same quiet image. A mascot face waiting after hours, with a history trapped behind the smile. The security camera view is one of the franchise's most important emotional inventions. It gives distance without safety. Looking through a camera means the danger is somewhere else, but the distance can vanish in a second. Static, blind spots, delayed movement and empty rooms all make the act of watching feel unreliable. The guard sees more than they would with bare eyes, yet never enough to feel calm. The office chair is just as important as the stage. FNAF horror is often seated. Horror, the fear of being stuck in one place while decisions arrive faster than the body can move. The guard cannot simply run through the front door. The night must be endured from inside a little box of light and buttons. That stillness turns every sound into an event. The phrase "after hours" carries the whole mood of the series. A place after hours is the same place and not the same place. The tables remain, the posters remain, the mascots remain, but the public reason for being there has disappeared. FNAF lives in that altered state, when the cheerful room empties out and begins to show what it has been holding back. At its deepest, FNAF is a story about consequences that refuse to stay buried. A body hidden in a suit, a child lost in a restaurant, a lie turned into policy, a circuit board scanned without care, a machine taught the wrong pattern. All of it comes back. The franchise keeps saying that harm does not vanish because the lights are turned on for another party. There is also a quiet difference between fear and dread in FNAF. Fear arrives when the face jumps from the dark. Dread arrives earlier, when the camera shows an empty stage that should not be empty, or when a hallway sound suggests movement before anything is visible. The facts around the series work best when they feed that dread. They prepare the room before the scare enters it. The restaurants are full of thresholds, curtains, doors, vents, office openings, backstage areas, safe rooms, service elevators, and digital overlays. Every threshold suggests that something can cross from one state into another. A performer becomes a machine becomes a grave, a game becomes a cover-up, a copy becomes a threat. If FNAF keeps opening thresholds and asking what came through, that is why the series remains strangely gentle beneath the violence. It is always, somewhere, about wanting the lost to be recognised. The clues, theories, spirits, names, drawings and hidden endings all circle the hope that the truth can still be found. Even when the story is frightening, part of it is listening for children who were ignored too long. And after so many rooms, the simplest image still works. A guard looking at a camera, waiting for a shape to appear where it should not be. That patience is the heart of the series. FNAF does not only scare by movement, it scares by making stillness feel temporary, as if every quiet second is only borrowing time from the next sound in the hall. One last small breath belongs to the company logo itself, because Fazbear Entertainment always looks cheerful before it looks guilty. That little smile is the whole spell. A brand promising fun while history waits behind the curtain. The franchise also has a rare patience with objects. A poster, plush, mask, arcade cabinet, party hat, cassette, badge, or circuit board can sit quietly for a long time before becoming important. That patience teaches a certain way of looking. Nothing in the restaurant is completely innocent after the first few nights. Every object might be decoration, evidence, bait, memory or joke, and the uncertainty gives the rooms their charge. FNAF is also a story about replacement. Old mascots are replaced by toy versions. Restaurants are replaced by attractions, simulations, malls and ruins. Human workers are replaced by systems. Memories are replaced by official stories. Even villains can be replaced by copies or echoes. But replacement never fully succeeds, because the older thing leaves a stain. The new face always seems to inherit something from the face before it. There is a particular sadness in the idea that children came for joy and became the reason the place could never be joyful again. That is the emotional wound beneath the machinery. Every later system, from spring locks to VR to the Mimic, grows around that first wrongness. The technology changes, but the grief underneath remains almost painfully simple. The series endures because it lets mystery and emotion hold hands. A clue can invite debate, but it can also hurt. A theory can be complicated, but the feeling beneath it may be direct. Someone was betrayed, someone was trapped, someone remembered, someone lied. When FNAF works, the puzzle never fully replaces the sorrow. The puzzle becomes one way of staying near it, and now the restaurant can grow quiet again. The cameras can click from room to room, the stage lights can dim, and the old characters can stand where they have always stood, smiling with the patience of things that know more than they say. FNAF is full of facts, but the reason those facts linger is softer than any timeline chart. A bear's song in the dark, a rabbit suit in a hidden room, a puppet trying to protect the lost, a broken child, a guilty son, a killer who will not stay gone, and a machine that learns to copy what it should never have learned. All of it gathers in the same haunted place. So let the prize counter fade, let the arcade screens go dark, and let the last little hum of the building settle into the walls. The facts can rest now like drawings taped near the office, each one pointing toward a bigger sadness, each one waiting for another night guard, another theory, another door, another light. Somewhere beyond the cameras, the music box winds down slowly. Somewhere behind the curtains, Pirate Cove is still. And for now, just for this quiet moment, nothing needs to move.